immersive education for Africa. The main goal for this is, as it was introduced, we've talked a lot about the business applications for VR, for AR, how we can generate more money, but the talk that I'll be holding is about my private project, which is called aVRica. And just to intro me real quick, I'm usually running the European, Middle Eastern, African, and Indian virtual reality business for Nvidia, which is a company that makes most of the GPUs that are driving the virtual reality experiences out on the show floor over there. I've been in the industry for quite a while. My first experience with virtual reality looked like this. It was a duct-taped prototype of the Oculus Rift. Back in 2012, I had the chance to try this as one of the first people in the world, and ever since then, I became a huge virtual reality enthusiast. I've helped found a community on the internet, which is the Oculus subreddit on reddit.com, which by now has become the largest unofficial community for virtual reality on the web. I just thought that virtual reality needs a foundation, needs a base at a traffic powerhouse like Reddit, which is among the top 10 websites in the world. I also co-founded a non-profit organization called EUVR to help push the envelope for European VR developers. We founded this together with meetup organizers from all across Europe, and we invite all of you to check out euvr.org, put in your company in there. We have a database of many companies that are working in this industry in Europe, and we invite everybody of you to also join that initiative. And then I also started a company in late 2015 together with two experts, and we did a photogrammetry application called realities.io that you can actually see outside on the show floor. If you go to the WDR booth, they're showing the last coal mine in Germany. And it's a photogrammetry experience that we've started in 2015, and we then went to Silicon Valley to go through an accelerator program called Boost VC. And during that time, I had the chance to learn a lot about how the industry works, and I had the chance to build a skill set that, because I was the CEO, to build a skill set of how to build a company from scratch, from the ground up. And then when we came back to Germany, Nvidia offered me the role as their head of VR for the EMEAI region. And so when I came back, I lay awake at night and I thought, well, I've got this skill set now that I've built, from fundraising to networking to marketing to PR to building an organizational structure to going through the legal process that's behind it. All of those skills, I thought, if I'm never going to build a company again, some of these skills might be lost. What else could I do with them? And so I had the idea, and that was the original idea. I could also build something that's not a for-profit organization, but a non-profit organization where you need a similar skill set. And that's how I came to found aVRica. It's a non-governmental organization to help bring immersive education to developing countries. And I have to say this, aVRica is a private initiative, and it's not affiliated with Nvidia. If you have any questions about what Nvidia is doing, they're doing amazing stuff, by the way, in VR, come up to me. I'm also totally down to talk about that. But in this talk, I want to mention how virtual reality can help emerging countries. And this is me in 2012 with one of the earliest headsets on my face. And you can see by the stupid grin that I have on my face, I'm very much enthusiastic about virtual reality back then, and I still am. Because virtual reality is a lot of fun. I mean, even five times world snooker champion Ronnie O'Sullivan has so much fun in VR that he thinks the table in front of him is solid and he falls on his knees. There's incredible illusions where your body truly believes that you're running down a crazy slide, even though you're just on a piece of wood that moves. And virtual reality, I think, is so powerful and so fun because it goes through every age group, from young to very old. It's a technology that many people can understand, and that's why I think it will become very, very powerful in the entertainment space. But virtual reality can do much more. There are lots of applications where VR can actually help create a better humankind. There's things like burn treatment, where you put on a VR glass and you are distracted from this very painful procedure that's being done on you. You can lose weight with virtual reality fitness training. You can save on the costs of general surgeries by the effect that by distracting the patient, you can use less sedatives, and those sedatives usually are very expensive and sometimes not even available in third world countries. You can train your own body to get rid of your fears. You can even make or help paraplegics walk again or move their legs to a certain degree, which is crazy because those patients with a combination of different technologies like virtual reality, they can get back basic bodily functions like bowel control, for example. So they can do their daily routine just like a normal person can. So virtual reality is fun, it has lots of business applications, but it can actually help create a more healthy and also a more educated world. And this education part is where I'm putting all my resources in. I truly believe that virtual reality has the ability to change the way we learn. And the way it does that is by taking something that many of you have probably seen hundreds, if not thousands of times on a piece of paper. This is how big the planets are in our solar system. And like I've said, I've seen this probably 100, maybe 500 times in my life, in textbooks, in school, on the internet, lots of times. But the first time I truly understood how big these planets actually are was in virtual reality. And many of you probably know this. It's an application. It's called Titans of Space. For those who don't know it, absolutely try this out. The first time you're sitting in your little capsule and you're floating around in the solar system, this is the first time when you truly realize how big Jupiter is and how massive the sun is. And again, I've seen this hundreds of times on a piece of paper. In VR, it suddenly becomes real and it becomes more impressive. This was my first educational experience in VR, and it still sticks with me. I still get goosebumps thinking about this journey that I've took. Because students perform better when learning with virtual reality. There's a broad range of studies that show that virtual reality can help with education. And one of the most recent ones was a test that was done in China, where they had two groups of students. One of them was trained with VR, the other was trained without VR. And if you do a test right after the lesson, which in this case was an astrophysics lesson, just like the one we just saw with Titans of Space, the VR group performs 27% better. If you take the same test 2 weeks later, the numbers actually go higher to 32%. Which means that in virtual reality applications, you learn faster, but you also retain that knowledge for a longer time, which is obviously the holy grail for education. And the best thing about this was 100% positive reception among students. Students, and especially young people, they love learning with new technology. They love something that's engaging, something where they have the feeling this is something new. It's not a dry old textbook where I've seen hundreds of them during their lifetime. So in short, virtual reality really helps with educating pupils and students. And the reason for that is, there's 4 reasons why virtual reality does this. And the first one is classrooms suddenly become infinite. How would you visualize the vast expanses of the universe in a classroom that's only 10 by 10 or 20 by 20 meter? It's just not possible. In virtual reality, you suddenly have the chance to go to infinity. You can travel to the Andromeda galaxy. You can do things that are literally impossible in a normal classroom. Like, for example, chemistry experiments that lead to explosions. Things like a rocket launch that starts right in front of your class. Or even things that have nuclear reactions. You just can't do that in a normal classroom because of safety reasons. In virtual reality, you can. You're in a safe environment. Your classroom is suddenly infinite. The second reason is that there's no symbolic translation going on. And this is something that I've already showed the example of Titans of Space and the solar system. When you read something on a 2D piece of paper, a symbolic translation happens in your brain where you conceptualize the things that you just read, and then you put them into an image or a spatial in a spatial way of looking at those things. So essentially, this symbolic translation that you have to do between the 2D piece of paper and the complex things that you actually want to learn is something that you can get rid of in VR. You just show the things just like you want to show them. Third one is humans learn best in a spatial way. Some of you might have heard of this. There's a strategy for those masterminds that can memorize hundreds of numbers or hundreds of objects that are in front of them on a table. Those mind masters, they have a trick called the memory palace. So imagine you have a table in front of you and you want to memorize the 20 things that are on this table. Then you have a minute or 2 minutes to actually memorize them. Somebody puts a drape on that table, and then you have to say what were those 20 items that were on a table. It's relatively hard. So what people do, and those mind masters do, they use a technique called the memory palace, where instead of memorizing just the items, they memorize a place that is very well known to them, like their home, for example. So what they do, instead of memorizing just the items, they put those items at locations in their home. So for example, I have this clicker, I put this clicker on my doorstep. I open the door, the next thing that I see is this laptop. I go up the stairs, and up the stairs is the water bottle. Those kind of things help you memorize items, abstract things, much better because you put them in relation to a spatial thing. And because humans have grown up hunting, judging distances, remembering where they put their weapons, where exactly their home is, the brain is very much accustomed and tuned to learning spatial things. And the fourth reason, and this is I think the most powerful one, is a lower cognitive load. Every time you're sitting in a classroom, there's a ton of stuff going on. Your fellow pupils are making fun on this side. There's something going on the outside of the classroom. If you look outside the window, all of these things that distract you from the actual thing that you want to learn is called cognitive load. And this cognitive load is something that's going on all the time. Your brain is filtering out information that is not useful for it all the time. I'm standing here, I'm holding this talk, there's a lot going on in the background. My brain is filtering all of this out because I'm focusing at the topic at hand. But this filtering out process obviously takes brain capacity. In virtual reality, you get rid of all of that. In virtual reality, you put on a headset and suddenly your visual and your audio sense are completely shut off from everything else that's going on around you. So your brain doesn't have to process all the time what's important and what's not important. It can just completely focus on the topic at hand. And those 4 reasons are the main reasons why virtual reality helps you learn better than traditional education. And that's how my idea for aVRica was born. I truly believe that helping educational systems in Africa will help close the gap between Western civilizations and the emerging countries. So I've built a team of both people from the Western world as well as people from Africa to help me realize this project. I've been working with Judith Okonkwo, who's the founder of EMEAI 3D in Nigeria. And I've also been working with other companies and universities in South Africa. So those are the 2 pilot countries that the initiative is in right now. And we're working very, very hard to make this a reality. Because if you look at the African educational systems, Africa is really the white spot on the landscape of education. This, what you see here on top, is the worldwide OECD ranking of educational systems. And as you can see, Africa is a white spot because there's not even data from those countries. If you look at the numbers, so this OECD ranking includes 76 countries. And of those 76 countries, the countries in Africa take the spots 64, 73, 75, and 76. So again, there's only 4 countries in Africa that even report to the OECD. And those ones are in the lowest top 12. And this is their reality. And this is our mission. We want to bring the learning advantage of immersive technologies where enhanced education actually has an impact. And to make that happen, I've built a timeline for you to see where we're standing at. The first thing I've done, even before launching the initiative, was going to both Lagos in Nigeria and Johannesburg and Cape Town in South Africa. Those 2 countries are the 2 pilot countries, and there's a reason for it. Nigeria, and many people don't know this, is an extreme country in every sense of the word. Nigeria, in the year 2050, will be the 3rd most populated country in the world after China, after India and China. So Nigeria has this crazy explosion of population, and at the same time, they're on the verge of becoming a very developed country. If you're going to Lagos, it doesn't really look like that. The streets are very run down, the infrastructure is really bad. Just going from A to B takes ages because of the traffic collapse that they have. But at the same time, Nigeria has the highest amount of startups on the African continent. It's really one of those hubs that takes together entrepreneurship, tech enthusiasm, and also they know that they need to do something. So that's why I've chosen Nigeria as the first country. South Africa is easier to explain. South Africa is the one African country that is kind of a flagship for other African countries. If something succeeds in South Africa, there's a high chance that it will multiply to other countries, kind of like a domino effect, because many African leaders are looking towards South Africa for embetterment of their own countries. And so pre-launch, I visited those countries, and what we did this is a picture from Nigeria. We had a workshop class. This is just one of those that we did, where we invited people from universities, from the ministries of education, from schools to talk about and really get the idea out of this educational revolution that's coming. Well, this was the first step in November 2017. It was part of phase 1, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later. And then in March of this year, I launched the project officially at an event called the Global Festival of Action. It's an event by the United Nations where they show off promising projects for reaching the Sustainable Development Goals. For those of you who don't know it, the United Nations have formulated those goals. It's 17 different goals. They're called SDGs. They're things like water for everybody, infrastructure for everybody, but also things like education. So this initiative, together with the United Nations, we want to help reach this Sustainable Development Goal of proper education for everybody. And so the future timeline looks a little bit like this. The first phase, and I've already started with this pre-launch, is educate and energize. The first thing that has to happen for a new technology to be put into place, especially in things like educational systems, is you have to raise awareness. You have to put the headset on as many faces as possible. Ideally of people that can then energize their surroundings and take the topic further than just within their own little bubble. Second phase is what I call scale and specialize. From the 2 pilot countries, Nigeria and South Africa, we want to make this available for the whole continent of Africa. This should be a platform for teachers and for students where people can actually get the educational content that fits to their curriculum. And for that, I'm working with a non-profit organization called Foundry 10 in the United States. For anybody who's interested in VR and education, those guys are really spearheading what you can do with virtual reality content in education. What they're doing is they're looking at existing content pieces and compare the benefits that those content pieces have among different age groups and in different educational sectors. And from that, we are gathering lots of knowledge of what kind of content is good for what age brackets. And then in this second phase, we're going to actually produce content that's localized to the African continent in the continent of Africa, so that the money that is being spent for those kind of content pieces is actually staying in the African ecosystem, which is very, very important. It doesn't make sense to drive an NGO that just funnels money from the Western world to Africa and then it goes somewhere. It really needs to stay there and help generate businesses. And that brings me to the third phase. One thing I realized while talking to my partners in Nigeria and South Africa is NGOs many times just don't work. You bring a lot of money, you do something that works in the Western world, and you apply it to a continent that's completely different. That is something that many NGOs have done, and that's something that we definitely want to avoid. We don't want to be the white people telling everybody how things are working. So one thing they've mentioned many times is you don't want to build an NGO, you actually want to build a business. You want to build something that sustainably generates revenue and sustainably helps raise the ecosystem, and with that also helps drive better education. And the end goal for this, and we've already prototyped this with my partner in Nigeria, is a headset that can run off of solar power. Because one of the main challenges in Africa is obviously the fact that there's just no power there. How do you run a VR headset without having electricity? This is a very hard problem. And we've prototyped a device. We've taken a very low-end virtual reality headset. It's a very prototype. We put it next to a solar panel, and it actually works. You can run a VR headset off of solar power. And the goal until 2025 is to find a manufacturer that is willing to take this step with us, develop a headset that is specifically made for the African continent. Because, again, as I said, population-wise, Africa is a huge market. So again, bringing the learning advantage of immersive technologies where it actually has the biggest impact is the goal of Africa, and that is bringing it to Africa. Thank you very much.